So we often find ourselves circling back to this really fascinating question, and how do certain ideas or movements just, well, explode and spread?
Right.
And recently, one of you sparked a really interesting line of thinking, asking about these historical periods of rapid church growth in North America.
Yeah.
What fueled those expansions? And, is there any chance we could see something similar playing out today?
That's exactly what we're diving into. We've got some pretty compelling sources that look at historical church planting movements, specifically in North America, and compare them to what's happening now.
Okay.
Our aim really is to try and pinpoint the core drivers behind those big growth periods and see if those same elements are maybe at play today.
Sort of understanding how movements take root and, crucially, how they multiply.
Exactly. Multiplication is key.
Okay, so let's go way back then, set the stage. Our sources, they really highlight the 19th century as, well, truly remarkable period for Christian growth here in North America.
Oh, absolutely.
There was this historian, Kenneth Scott Latourette, who described it as an era of unprecedented advance. And he specifically noted the discipling and congregationalizing of the continent.
Congregationalizing. That's quite a word.
It is, isn't it?
And if you think about the context, this was the era of westward expansion. The sources show a really clear parallel. Settlers move west, churches pop up right alongside them. By the end of the 1800s, most towns, even way out on the frontier, had at least one Protestant community getting started.
Which naturally raises a big question for denominations today, right? What was the spark? What kind of drive did these early folks have?
Yeah, what fueled it?
And what kind of church structures let them keep pace with this incredible growth? I mean, across this huge, often tough landscape. We're talking circuit rider.
Right, those horseback preachers covering massive areas.
And brush arbor revivals, these intense outdoor meetings, and of course, the Great Awakenings, those big waves of religious renewal.
Exactly. And to really get under the hood of this rapid expansion, our sources point to a fantastic case study. The Sandy Creek Baptist Church.
Ah, Sandy Creek.
Yeah, founded in rural North Carolina way back in 1755. It became, as historian Robert Baker put it, the mother of all the separate Baptists.
Mother of all the separate Baptists. Wow, that really tells you something about its impact. What made this one church so seminal?
Well, just the sheer speed and scale of its growth is pretty remarkable. In only 17 years, this one church became a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother to 42 other churches.
17 years, 42 churches.
And get this, those churches then produced 125 ministers.
Wow.
Think about that kind of exponential growth. So for you listening, if you're thinking about building a network or seeing an idea spread, that kind of multiplication is just vital.
Yeah, it's not just one place getting bigger. It's like creating this whole web, this network. And the geographical reach was huge too, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Our sources say it went west to the Mississippi, south to Georgia, east to the coast and Chesapeake Bay, and north up to the Potomac.
Incredible spread.
And within just 3 years of starting, 3 fully established churches came out of Sandy Creek, with over 900 members between them.
3 years, 900 members.
Yeah, they even named some early branches. Little River, Grassy Creek, Southwest, Black River, New River, Lockwood's Folly.
And what's fascinating here, you mentioned, is that this wasn't just random sprawl, right? There might have been a strategy.
Well, historian William Lumpkin certainly thought so. He believed there was a deliberate missionary strategy. He points to leaders like Shubal Stearns, Daniel Marshall, Philip Mulkey, kind of strategically focusing on different regions to spread the message and plant new communities.
So a mix of organic attraction and a conscious plan for outreach.
It seems like a powerful combination.
And the long-term legacy.
Yeah.
By 1881, someone estimated thousands of churches came from Stearns and Sandy Creek.
Thousands. It's a huge lasting impact.
So what was the engine? What was the DNA, as the source calls it, that powered this kind of explosive growth?
Okay, yeah, several key things stand out. First, this fierce belief in local church autonomy.
Local control.
Exactly. An early observer, Morgan Edwards, noted their strong conviction that authority was in each congregation. It couldn't be, handed over to some bigger body. Very grassroots, very decentralized.
That makes a lot of sense, especially out on the frontier. Central control will be tough.
What
else? What else was in this DNA?
Enthusiasm. Huge factor. Historian Elliot Smith talks about the zeal and emotional preaching.
Right.
They relied on ministers who maybe weren't formally educated, had noisy meetings, women played a significant role, it was passionate, sometimes even caused friction with more established groups.
Yeah, you can imagine. That raw enthusiasm, though, it's often what catches fire in the beginning, isn't it?
Absolutely. It can be incredibly contagious.
Okay, what's next?
Persistence. Persistence when facing persecution. This one's powerful.
How so?
Well, the sources say growth didn't just stop when they faced opposition. Sometimes it increased.
Really?
Yeah, there's a quote from Garnett Ryland saying, Baptist churches formed in every Virginia county where Baptists were actually imprisoned.
Wow. So adversity fueled growth.
It seems like it. It suggests that challenges actually strengthen their resolve. You know, for anyone trying to build something new and facing setbacks, that resilience is a huge lesson.
Definitely. Speaks volumes about their conviction.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess a core part was just sharing their beliefs.
Yeah.
Evangelism.
Absolutely essential. Reuben E. Alley is quoted emphasizing that true commitment wasn't just personal faith, it meant actively seeking the salvation of others. Being a believer meant being an evangelist.
A personal responsibility to spread the word.
Exactly.
And finally, the source mentions ardor. What's that about?
So historian Walter Sheridan breaks down ardor as this mix of things. Individualism, strong personal agency, congregationalism, that local church control again, biblicism, deep reliance on the Bible, and egalitarianism, this belief in the equality of all believers. And he argued this unique combo led to this incredible devotion to freedom.
Right. So recapping the DNA, passion, evangelism, scripture focus, local control, equality, freedom, that really paints a picture of dynamic grassroots expansion back then.
It really does.
So how does that stack up against Christianity in North America today, early 21st century?
The crucial question. Well, our sources show Christianity is still, a major part of the landscape. Up to 68% of Americans, maybe 275 million people, identify as church members.
That's a lot of people.
It is. And even older data, like the National Council of Churches from 2001, and that only counts reporting denominations, showed over 151 million members and nearly 321,000 congregations, and significant financial giving, nearly $27 billion back then.
Okay, so the numbers seem big on the surface, but what's the feel? Is it the same kind of expansion we saw back then, or have things shifted?
Well, that's where it gets complex. We certainly see the rise of megachurches, right? These huge congregations, memberships over 20,000, First Baptist Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Prestonwood, places like that.
Yeah, they're very visible.
Definitely prominent. But the source also brings up potential issues like absentee membership.
What do you mean?
Well, there's this anecdote about a Kenyan pastor visiting the U.S., just baffled that an American pastor could have 20,000 members but maybe only see, say, a few thousand on a given Sunday.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Raises questions about engagement, doesn't it?
Exactly. Does a name on a roll equal active participation? Maybe not always.
And then there's the flip side, the sheer number of unchurched people. The source notes, even with high membership rates, there are still around 88 million unchurched Americans.
A huge number.
Yeah.
And perhaps the most telling stat for this discussion anyway comes from a study back in the 80s by Winarn.
What did it find?
He found that not one single county in the U.S. saw church attendance growth outpace general population growth for that whole decade.
Not one. Wow, that suggests stagnation, not expansion.
Pretty much, a stark contrast to the 19th century.
And the source also mentions demographic shifts. More non-Christian immigration since WWII, establishing their own centers, maybe a sense that Protestant churches aren't as central to society as they once were.
Right, those are factors too. So given all this, the large numbers, but also the challenges, the stagnation, the shifts, is there any hope for like a modern Sandy Creek Renaissance? Could we see another wave of rapid growth?
Yeah. Is that dynamic even possible today?
Interestingly, the source suggests that for a growing number of Christians today, the answer is yes.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a noted increase in leaders adopting what are called radical new visions that, kind of echo those past movements in some ways.
Like what? What are these visions leading to?
Well, one key trend highlighted is the rise of house churches.
Meeting in homes instead of big buildings.
Exactly. The source even calls the people involved ecclesiastical subversives.
Huh. Strong term.
It is. Dan Mayhew from a network in Oregon gives a good picture. Small groups, homes, shared meals, discussion, prayer, communion. Very relational, very intimate.
It sounds very different from a typical Sunday morning service. And hard to count, I imagine.
Extremely hard. There was a 1994 estimate, maybe 80 million Americans in small worship or Bible study groups. But yeah, many wouldn't show up in official church counts.
Right.
But you see them online. Canadian examples like 43rd House Group, The Dwelling Place, Face to Face. Some interesting website names, too, like www.housechurch.ca, www.theearlychurch.com. Even one called www.thechurchofnowcrap.com.
Church of No Crap. Okay, that definitely sends a message.
Doesn't it? And apparently there's lots of discussion within these groups about organization, authority, freedom, often going back to the New Testament as a guide.
Yeah.
It sounds very decentralized, evolving, kind of like the early Baptists, actually.
Interesting parallel. And within this house church world, are there actual movements focused on planting more churches?
Yes, explicitly. The source mentions Church Multiplication Associates, or CMA, started by Neil and Dana Cole in California.
CMA. Okay.
By 2001, they had 9 networks, multiple states, even other countries, averaging 1 new church start per week.
A week? That's Sandy Creek level multiplication almost.
It definitely echoes it. And their core values are really interesting, very action-oriented.
Like what?
Things like bad people make good soil. This analogy of moths and cockroaches for how people respond. And this idea, lower the bar of how we do church, but raise the bar of what it means to be a disciple.
Shifting the focus from structure to commitment.
Exactly. Other values, too. Don't organize it until you have an it. Personal change before community change. Raise leaders from the harvest, not just for it. Get out of the buildings, into the harvest. Give people the Bible. It's very organic, very grassroots.
That focus on empowering local leaders and the core message. You can see how that might resonate if you're trying to build momentum for anything, really.
Definitely a takeaway there.
And there are other examples, too.
Yeah, Jonathan Campbell's network in California, also growing into other states. His values maybe sound more traditional, but still action-focused. Love Jesus, reach the unreached, finding those persons of peace in a community.
Persons of peace.
Yeah, receptive people. Discipling social networks, they call it oikos evangelism, sharing faith with friends, family, coworkers, empowering every believer.
Using existing relationships.
Okay.
Smart.
Very much so. And then there's Dovey Christian Fellowship International, started in Pennsylvania back in 1980.
Suvi. What's their story?
Larry and Laverne Kreider felt called to an underground church. Vision was homes, lay leaders reaching the unchurched. Grew from 3 small groups to 2,300 members and home groups in 10 years.
Wow.
Then they decentralized in '96, and by 2001 had 80 cell-based churches on 5 continents, maybe 20,000 people involved globally.
So these aren't just tiny, isolated things. They can scale significantly.
They can, and it's not just independent networks either. Even some mega churches are using this small group model extensively.
Right, you mentioned that earlier, like Saddleback.
Saddleback, yeah, Rick Warren. 20,000 members, but 4,000 home cell groups. Willow Creek, Bill Hybels, similar numbers. 17,000 members, over 2,600 home fellowships.
So thousands of small groups within the big church.
And Bethany World Prayer Center actually shifted entirely to home cells back in '93. Reached nearly 600 groups by 2000. It shows even big established places see value in this intimacy.
It seems like a widespread recognition of something important there.
And add to that the rising cost of property, especially in cities. It's forcing some denominations to look beyond the big cathedral-style building.
Practical pressures, too.
Exactly. The source mentions Baptist associations in Chicago, Houston, Dallas, actively promoting house church planting. Even the Southern Baptist Main Mission Board adopted a New Testament church planting movement vision.
So it's happening in multiple levels. Grassroots networks, big churches adapting, denominations exploring.
Yeah, it's a complex picture.
Okay, so bring this all together. We have this powerful historical precedent, Sandy Creek being a prime example, of this rapid grassroots multiplying church growth.
Right.
And now, today, we see these contemporary house churches, networks like CMA and Dovey, mega churches using small groups, denominations looking at new models.
It's all happening.
It really does lead back to that question from the source. Has the Sandy Creek birthright, that legacy of explosive growth, been kind of traded for the comforts of more institutional churches? Or could we actually be on the verge of another era like that?
Yeah, is a resurgence possible?
It feels like, as the source says at the end, these are yeasty times. Lots bubbling under the surface.
Yeasty times. I like that. So yeah, to sum up our deep dive, We looked at those historical drivers, enthusiasm, grassroots leaders, multiplication focus, core beliefs that fueled growth back then.
Right.
And we've seen how similar dynamics, maybe in new forms like house churches, are popping up today. Plus, this growing openness, even in established denominations, to try these decentralized relational approaches.
And for you listening, whether your interest is specifically religious movements or just broadly how ideas in communities catch fire and spread,
Yeah, any kind of movement.
this whole exploration offers some really fascinating parallels. Potential lessons, maybe. The power of passionate belief, decentralized structures empowering local action,
Yeah.
focusing on personal connection. These seem like recurring themes.
Definitely recurring themes and explosive growth. Which brings us to a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over.
Okay.
Thinking about this history, these current trends, what fundamental shifts in mindset or structure might be needed for any movement, religious, social, maybe even in your work, to get truly exponential growth and real impact today?
What makes something really take off now?
Yeah. And what parts of that Sandy Creek DNA, that raw enthusiasm, the resilience, the focus on the core message, the local autonomy, which of those are maybe universally applicable for building something strong and widespread?